My name is Meredith Cole, and if you'd asked me a year ago if I thought I'd ever sit at the same dinner table as my ex-husband again, I would have laughed. Bitterly. But that night, I did. Because of our daughter, Bethany. She's 13, stubborn like her mother, and still naive enough to believe her father has goodness buried somewhere underneath all the mess. I wanted to believe it too, that people change, that apologies mean something, that when a man says he wants to make peace, maybe, just maybe, he really means it. Elliot hadn't spoken to us in nearly a year, not since the custody hearing turned ugly and the court gave me full rights. There had been screaming, accusations, veiled threats, but then months of silence. Until 2 weeks ago, when I got a simple message in my inbox. I've done a lot of thinking. I'd like to cook dinner for you and Bethany. No agenda, just peace. Let me try to make things right. Elliot. I showed it to my sister. She said absolutely not. I showed it to my lawyer. He raised an eyebrow, told me to tread carefully. But Bethany? She saw the message over my shoulder and the way her face lit up. God help me, I couldn't say no, not to that look. So we went. He greeted us with that old, charming smile that used to fool everyone. Shirt tucked in, table already set. He hugged Bethany too long, barely nodded at me. Said he made her favorite, baked ziti and garlic bread from scratch. Poured me a glass of red wine I didn't ask for. It was strange, but I told myself it was nerves. Maybe he really had changed. We sat down. We ate. We smiled. Politely, carefully. He asked Bethany about school, asked me how my job was. He even joked, lightly, about how bad he used to be. I didn't laugh. It was about halfway through the second bite that I started to feel it. First in my hands, then my lips. Like my skin was buzzing. Bethany's fork slipped from her fingers. Her eyes widened. "Mom," she whispered, clutching the edge of the table. I reached for her, but my arms felt heavy. My knees buckled as I tried to stand. The room tilted. I could hear Elliot's footsteps, calmly moving to the hallway. And then I heard his voice. "It's done," he said into the phone, barely 10 feet away. "They won't bother me again. You'll have what you asked for by morning." I lay there on the floor, body frozen, but mind racing. And I knew. If I moved, he'd know I was still awake. If Bethany moved, it was over. So I forced my lips to move, inch by inch, and whispered the only thing I could. "Stay down." I don't know how long we stayed there, limp on the floor, but every second felt like an hour. My heartbeat thudded in my ears, steady and loud enough I worried he'd hear it. My vision pulsed, narrowed at the edges like I was watching the world through a tunnel. I could hear Bethany breathing beside me, shallow, controlled. She was listening. She understood. I'd never been prouder of her in my life. I heard him walk back into the room. His steps were casual, not rushed, not heavy. He wasn't panicking, which meant he thought it worked. The chair creaked as he sat. He sighed once, like someone finishing a chore. Then I heard his fork scrape against a plate, the clink of his glass. He was eating. "Should have done this a long time ago," he muttered. He wasn't talking to anyone now, just himself. And that made it worse. They were just distractions, liabilities. She took everything and still had the nerve to hold me in court like a criminal. Now I'll finally get peace. Finally get free. He stood again. His footsteps moved toward the kitchen. The faucet ran. Maybe he was cleaning up. I fought the urge to twitch, to cough. I felt the wetness of the wineglass still on my lip. I hadn't even swallowed most of it. I was lucky. I had set it down after the second sip. Bethany hadn't. He walked down the hall, muttering. A drawer opened. I heard keys. A door closed softly. The side door, not the front. We were alone. The silence screamed in my ears. Very slowly, I lifted one hand off the floor. It shook, numb and weak, but it moved. I reached for Bethany and found her hand. Her fingers closed around mine. "Mom," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse. "I feel sick." "I know, baby, I know. Don't move fast. Stay here." I rose to my knees and nearly fell again. My balance was shot, but I made it to the hallway wall and used it to brace myself as I checked the door, locked from the inside. Elliot had left. Not for long, but long enough. I grabbed Bethany and helped her sit up. She gagged once, but nothing came. Her eyes were glassy, and her body trembled in my arms. "I'm gonna get us out of here," I said. "Now." My phone was in my purse, by the front door. I staggered toward it, dragging Bethany behind me, each step like walking underwater. I fumbled the zipper open, hands numb and heavy, and found the phone. No service. I looked out the window. Elliot's truck was gone. I didn't know how much time we had, but it wouldn't be long. "Shoes," I whispered. "We go. Now." Bethany could barely stand, but she didn't argue. We made it out the door and into the night air. I helped her down the porch steps, holding her weight as best I could. We crossed the yard in shadows, away from the driveway, through the hedge gap near the side fence. The one Elliot never fixed. The neighbor's house was 2 lots over. I prayed someone would be home. As we reached their driveway, a porch light flicked on. A woman opened the door, and for the first time since dinner, I let myself cry. The woman who opened the door wore a bathrobe and held a cordless phone in one hand. I must have looked half dead, because she didn't even hesitate. "Come inside," she said, stepping aside before I could speak. "What happened?" "Oh my God, what happened to the girl?" "Call 911, I croaked. He poisoned us. My ex-husband. Please." Bethany slumped into a chair by the front hallway, shaking like a leaf in a storm. Her face was pale, and I could hear her breath catch in her chest every few seconds, like it was taking everything in her to stay upright. The woman, her name was Maureen, nodded rapidly and disappeared into the kitchen. I could hear her talking to the dispatcher. I don't remember all the words, just fragments. Poisoned, young girl, barely conscious, yes, right now. The ambulance arrived in under 10 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime. They checked our vitals, lifted Bethany onto a stretcher, and helped me into the second one. I wanted to protest. I didn't want to be separated, but my body wasn't mine yet. I couldn't stop shaking. The paramedics started an IV immediately and gave us oxygen. It was working, slowly, but it was working. I kept repeating Elliot's name to anyone who would listen. "He did this. Elliot Kerrigan, my ex-husband. We were at his house." They nodded, took notes, promised officers were already on the way. At the hospital, they ran tests, pumped our stomachs, hooked us to fluids, and dimmed the lights in our rooms. I asked for Bethany every half hour. I wasn't allowed to see her until they stabilized her vitals. When they finally let me in, she was sleeping, still and quiet, with color returning to her cheeks. I sat beside her and held her hand. Only then did the sobs come. Silent, hard, shaking sobs that I'd buried for hours, weeks, maybe years. Detective Marla Grayson showed up just before dawn. She walked into my room like she'd already sized up the whole case on her way in. She was tall, no makeup, and held a notepad like it was part of her hand. "I'm told you believe your ex-husband tried to kill you and your daughter," she said without preamble. I nodded. "He didn't believe we'd survive. He said it." She raised her brow. "Did you record it?" Number I couldn't move. I barely breathed. "But you heard it?" "Yes." He said, "It's done. They won't bother me again." Her pen scratched the paper quickly. "And you're sure he wasn't just venting?" I stared at her for a second, then leaned forward. "He made the food, poured the wine. My daughter collapsed. I collapsed. He walked away calmly and made a call. He didn't call 911. He didn't check on us. He left. She looked at me carefully, then closed her notebook. We found traces of benzodiazepine and another sedative in your blood, she said. Something called lorazepam, likely crushed and mixed into the food. Same for your daughter. It's enough for us to open a formal investigation. We're treating it as attempted homicide. I felt my breath catch again, but not from fear this time, relief. But, she continued, Elliot's not at the house, and he's not answering his phone. His truck is gone. We've issued a BOLO. I closed my eyes. He's running. Yes, she said, and we're going to find him. But I knew Elliot. He wasn't running. He was preparing. They discharged me before they discharged Bethany, which nearly broke me. But the doctors insisted she needed another day for observation, and I couldn't argue. I kissed her forehead, whispered that I'd be back before lunch, and promised not to do anything without telling her first. She was too tired to answer, but her fingers curled around mine with a strength that made me want to scream. Outside, the air felt sharp, cold in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. Detective Grayson waited by the door, holding a file under her arm and watching me with eyes that missed nothing. We found his truck, she said, abandoned at a park and ride on the edge of town. No cameras, no prints. He wiped it down. I nodded slowly. That's Elliot. Clean, efficient, no panic. She tilted her head. That's not how most people would describe their ex. I didn't smile. Then most people didn't marry a man who could lie without blinking. We walked to her car. She opened the door, paused, and looked back at me. You said earlier that he was calm after dinner, detached. Like he'd made peace with it, I replied. She hesitated, then got in. That's the part that worries me. She took me back to my house, the one Elliot had moved out of 2 years ago when the divorce got messy. It wasn't large, but it was safe. Or had been. Now it felt too exposed. Every window a possible eye. Every knock a possible echo of something I couldn't prepare for. Inside, my phone was filled with missed calls. Friends, co-workers. My sister Jenna, whose voicemails got angrier with each new one. You went to dinner with him? Are you out of your mind? And later, call me. Please. I'm worried. The media had picked it up by morning. Mother and child poisoned. Ex-husband wanted for questioning. But the story was shallow, sanitized. No mention of the custody case. No mention of Elliot's quiet threats. No mention of how this wasn't some heat-of-the-moment act. He had planned it. I sat on the couch and listened to the police scanner app, not because I expected news, but because silence made my skin crawl. Then the phone rang again. Unknown number. I shouldn't have answered, but I did. There was a pause on the other end. Then a low, calm voice. You should have let me finish dinner. I froze. You don't get it yet, Elliot continued. You never did. You always thought you were smarter. But this isn't about you anymore. What do you want? I whispered. He laughed quietly. Want? No, Meredith. I don't want anything. I already have what I need. The line went dead. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just sat there, staring at the floor until the doorbell rang. It was Detective Grayson. You need to pack a bag, she said. Now. That was a burner phone. He's nearby. Detective Grayson didn't wait for me to argue. She walked straight into the living room, eyes sharp, scanning the space like she expected Elliot to slither out from under the couch. 5 minutes, Meredith, she said, glancing toward the hallway. Just what you need. The rest we'll sort later. I grabbed a duffel bag from the hall closet and tossed in the basics. Clothes for me and Bethany, Bethany's asthma medication, a notebook with court dates and documents I didn't dare leave behind. My hands moved fast, but my mind spun slower. My vision narrowed to what fit inside a zipper. Everything else, photos, furniture, memories, I had to pretend didn't matter. For now, they didn't. "We're moving you to a safe location," Grayson said as I shoved a pair of jeans into the bag. "Not in town, not even in the county. You'll have protection. Temporary, but solid. Just until we catch him." "And if you don't?" I asked. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw uncertainty behind the badge. "We will," she said, but her voice was lower. Outside, a plain black SUV idled in the driveway. No sirens, no lights. Just a man in the driver's seat with a beige jacket and a watch that blinked with the time. He nodded once when I stepped out. His name was Nolan, and he didn't smile. Bethany was already at the new location. The hospital had quietly discharged her that morning, transferring her directly into protective custody. She didn't know we were meeting her yet. I clung to that detail. A surprise reunion. Something normal, something kind. We drove for nearly 2 hours, past the freeway, through stretches of country road, into a part of the state I didn't recognize. The safe house was a single-story brick cottage tucked into the trees. No neighbors, no mailboxes, just nature and silence. I wanted to feel safer, but all I felt was removed. Inside, Bethany was curled up on a floral couch, wrapped in a hoodie 3 sizes too big. Her head whipped around when I came in, and for the first time in days, she smiled. Not the tired smile from the hospital, a real one. I dropped the bag and pulled her to me, breathing in her scent, her life, her warmth. "I missed you," she whispered. "I missed you more." Later that night, after she fell asleep in the bedroom down the hall, I sat with Grayson in the kitchen over lukewarm tea. She had her laptop open, notes scattered, a burner phone beside her that buzzed now and then with texts from officers in the field. "He's not alone," she said. "We believe someone helped him get out. A man named Clay Weller. Ever heard of him?" I froze. "He used to work with Elliot. Construction projects mostly. Sketchy money. Tax issues. Elliot cut ties 2 years ago, or so I thought." "Well, Clay's name just popped up on an old car registration tied to a black van, one that was parked outside the pharmacy you visited last week." My blood turned to ice. "You think he's watching the pharmacy now?" "We think he's watching everything." Grayson rubbed her temple. "We also think Elliot may be using Bethany as leverage. Not just to punish you, but to claim something. We just don't know what yet." I stared down into my cup. The steam long gone. "Then we're not safe here either." "No," she said. "We're not. But now we know where the snakes are coiled. The cottage walls were thick, but not thick enough to stop the wind. Or my thoughts." At night, I lay awake listening to every creak of the trees and hum of passing wildlife, wondering which sound might actually be boots or tires or something else we weren't supposed to hear. Bethany had started sleeping deeper again, thanks to the medication and the sense that I was close by, but I knew it was temporary. Children pick up on fear no matter how well you try to smile through it. Detective Grayson returned the next morning with a box of files. She didn't knock, just walked straight in and set the box down on the small wooden table near the window. "Thought you might want context," she said, lifting the lid. "There's more on Clay. And Elliot. Things we didn't know until yesterday." I sat across from her and opened the folder labeled Kerrigan, Elliot, Financial Review. Inside were tax returns, highlighted bank statements, wire transfers, and flagged correspondence. Pages and pages, all carefully tabbed by her hand. But what caught my eye wasn't the numbers. It was a printout of an email between Elliot and a woman named Terry Langford. "Who's Terry?" I asked. "She worked at the county courthouse," Grayson said flatly. "Until last month. She quit suddenly. No notice." "What did she do for Elliot?" She gave him access to your custody file, your sealed medical records, even a list of addresses we used during your temporary protection order last year. I closed the file. So he always knew where we were, even when we thought we were hidden. Grayson nodded. It gets worse. We believe Terry altered a few court documents, might have even misfiled one of your old restraining orders. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I just stared out the window at the quiet trees and the frozen leaves, wondering how many people had helped Elliot, because he smiled nicely and handed them cash. Later, after Grayson left, I sat with Bethany on the couch while she tried to explain a nightmare she'd had. He was watching me through the fireplace, she said. He said I was too much like you, that I asked too many questions. It felt like a punch. I hadn't told her what Grayson shared. I hadn't said anything about the surveillance or the altered files. But children feel things, sometimes even before we do. Bethany's eyes held too much truth for a girl her age. That night, I turned on the Safe House laptop and searched through old court records I had backed up on a flash drive. Things I hadn't looked at in over a year. Hidden clauses, language Elliot had once insisted go into our divorce agreement. I was tired when I first signed it, broken, just trying to keep Bethany. I didn't notice half of what his lawyer slipped in. And there it was, buried in legalese under the joint custody section. Should one parent be deemed unfit or incapacitated by court ruling, full legal decision-making authority, including medical and estate considerations, shall fall to the remaining guardian. Bethany, medical, estate. I clicked back to the bank statements Grayson had left. One name appeared 3 times. Von Doren Neurotech. I hadn't even realized I was whispering out loud when I said it. This isn't about me. It's about what Bethany carries. And suddenly, the timing of everything, his disappearance, the dinner, the call, made sense in a sick, terrible way. He wasn't trying to kill us. He was trying to erase me and keep her. I woke to silence and a flicker of morning light leaking in through the blinds. Bethany was still asleep, her arm draped across the side of the bed, her breath steady and soft. I sat in the kitchen with coffee I didn't remember brewing and stared at my hands. They were trembling again. Grayson arrived just after 7, looking like she hadn't slept either. Her hair was pulled into a rough bun, and her eyes were sharp but tired. She dropped a thin file on the table between us and took a seat without a word. I opened the folder and felt my stomach tighten. A document from Van Doren Neurotech, signed by Elliot, authorizing preliminary diagnostic access to non-custodial dependent, female minor, age 13. Date: 1 week before the dinner. I looked up at her. He already submitted her name. Grayson nodded. We confirmed it last night, and it's not just one form. There's a paper trail, quiet but deliberate, enough to suggest he was trying to leverage Bethany's medical history for some kind of trial placement or study approval, possibly for money. What kind of study? We're not sure yet, she admitted. Van Doren's been under investigation before. Experimental cognition work, gene mapping, even rumors of behavioral reconditioning, most of it buried behind NDAs and shell companies. And what does Bethany have to do with it? Grayson pulled out another page. A report from a pediatric neurologist, someone Elliot had paid privately. It referenced mild early-onset synesthesia and high pattern retention. She's bright, Meredith. Gifted in subtle ways. Most people wouldn't think twice about it, but Elliot's been tracking it, even before your divorce. The room felt smaller with each sentence. He poisoned us, I whispered, to get me out of the way, not to hurt Bethany. He needs her intact. Grayson nodded. And now that he knows you're alive, he'll double down. I sat back and stared out the window. The trees were still, no movement, no wind. Just the weight of knowing the man I once trusted more than anyone had studied our daughter like she was a project. What do I do? I asked quietly. We go public, she said. Media coverage, leverage. He can't operate in the shadows if we drag him into the light. And if that makes him desperate? Grayson's face didn't flinch. Then we force his hand, and when he moves, we catch him. Later that day, I sat down across from Bethany with a paper and pen. She watched me with those big eyes, still tired, but trying to be strong. I need to tell your story, I said, not because you did anything wrong, but because someone needs to hear the truth before he turns it into something else. She hesitated. Will people believe me? I reached for her hand and squeezed. They don't have to. They just need to see you. The rest will follow. That night, I recorded a video. Just me, alone, speaking from the safe house kitchen. I explained the dinner, the poisoning, the custody agreement. I didn't show Bethany's face, but I said her name. I said Elliot's name too. And I ended with this. If something happens to me, my daughter is not for sale. She is not a file, or a trial, or a subject. She is a child, and I will not vanish so someone else can claim her. We sent it to every major outlet by dawn. By noon, the phones were ringing, and Elliot was still quiet. Too quiet. The morning after the video was released, the safe house phone rang. It wasn't Elliot. It was a reporter from a major news network. Then another, then a third. They wanted quotes, footage, a chance to speak with me directly. Grayson handled the calls with her usual steel. She told them we were unavailable for comment, but the message was clear. Elliot's mask had slipped. The world now saw something twisted behind the veneer of a clean-shaven father who once sat on charity boards. But Elliot still hadn't responded. Not a single message, no lawyer, no press release, no social media post, not even a denial. That kind of silence wasn't defeat. It was planning. Grayson warned us we'd need to relocate again. Even a safe house becomes unsafe when the news spreads. But before we could leave, something else happened. Bethany received a package. It was delivered by courier with no return address, and the label was printed on a nondescript thermal sticker. Impossible to trace. I saw it on the porch while I was boiling water for tea. I told Grayson immediately. She opened it in gloves, carefully slicing the tape. Inside, a stuffed fox. Bethany's favorite toy when she was 3. The one she had named Oliver. The one that went missing when we left the first shelter. Pinned to its neck was a note. You never should have taken her. Now I have to fix it myself. Bethany stood silently behind us, staring at the toy with wide, quiet eyes. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just turned and walked back to the bedroom, closing the door without a word. That night, I sat with Grayson on the front porch as we waited for the transport van to arrive. The stars overhead felt cold, unreachable. Is there any chance he's bluffing? I asked. Grayson shook her head. He's too quiet and too far ahead. Whatever he's planning, it's not spontaneous. She handed me a tablet. What's this? Footage from a storage facility in Danton. Elliot accessed a unit 2 days ago. He used an alias, but the camera caught him. We think he's storing equipment. What kind of equipment? We're still waiting on the inventory, she said. But Meredith, this isn't just a father with a vendetta. This is someone with infrastructure, money, silence. I took a deep breath. Then we stay one step ahead. But I didn't sleep that night, because I knew, deep down, he was done waiting, and soon he'd make his move. It happened just before midnight. The motion sensor light outside the safe house blinked once, then went out. I was still awake, sitting beside Bethany's bed. She'd fallen asleep an hour earlier, curled up against the pillow with a flashlight still on in her hand. I'd tried to read, to distract myself, but every page blurred. My eyes had been locked on the window instead, watching for movement that never came, until that light. I didn't wake Grayson right away. She had warned us to expect false alarms. Wildlife, wind. We were rural, remote, but something about the light failing, not flickering, not dimming, but snapping out, sent a ripple through my chest. Then I heard it. 3 soft knocks. Not on the front door, on the back wall of the house. I moved quickly. I didn't speak. I didn't breathe louder than necessary. I crossed the hall to Grayson's room and tapped her shoulder once. She was upright in a second, gun in hand, no confusion in her face. She nodded. I pointed to the back. She moved like water. Silent, practiced. She reached for the hidden panel under the kitchen drawer, typed in a code, and the lights inside the house dropped into a dull amber. Silent alarm triggered. Backup would be on the way. But minutes felt like miles when you're waiting to be hunted. Grayson motioned for me to stay low and keep Bethany locked in the room. I obeyed, but I took the baseball bat I kept under the bed with me. I couldn't watch Bethany sleep, not now. I waited by the door, hand trembling around the wood. Then glass shattered. It was the far side window, small, near the pantry. Not an entry point, a distraction. Grayson moved fast. I heard the scuffle, a shout, 2 heavy thuds, then silence. I counted to 20 in my head, then opened the door. Grayson stood over a man in black, not Elliot, younger, thin, unfamiliar, unconscious. Accomplice? I whispered. She nodded. Not a professional, but trained enough. A phone buzzed in the man's pocket. Grayson snatched it. One new message. If they're not gone by morning, I'll come myself. Elliot. He was tired of games. He was coming. I didn't sleep the night before. I didn't even lie down. I sat beside Bethany's bed, holding her hand while the shadows outside thickened like oil. I wasn't scared anymore, not in the way I used to be. I was something quieter, sharper, a mother who had run out of exits and excuses. Grayson stood watch near the kitchen window, her weapon holstered at her hip, but her eyes alert. Reinforcements were en route, but they wouldn't arrive until dawn. That meant we had to hold until first light. At 3:47 in the morning, the power went out. Bethany stirred. I squeezed her hand. Stay down, don't move until I say. Grayson didn't flinch. She stepped forward, gun drawn, flashlight beam steady and slow as she scanned the hallway. He's here, she said, like it was a fact she'd been waiting for. The back door creaked, not kicked, not shattered, just slowly opened, deliberate. A silhouette filled the frame. Broad shoulders, slow steps. I recognized the rhythm of his walk before I saw his face. Elliot. He didn't speak right away. You made this harder than it had to be, he said quietly, stepping into the amber-lit hallway. It didn't have to go this far. Grayson raised her gun. Not another step. Elliot smirked, hands raised half-heartedly. Relax. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I just want to talk. Grayson didn't lower the weapon. You lost the right to talk the moment you poisoned a child. His eyes flicked past her, to the bedroom door. She's not just a child. You have no idea what she is, what she's capable of. They want her for a reason. I stepped out into the hallway slowly. And you were going to deliver her like cargo? His expression changed. For the first time in years, I saw something slip. Not anger, not regret, fear. I had no choice, he said, voice cracking. They told me, if I didn't bring her in, they'd come for me. For all of us. Then why not go to the police? I demanded. Why not protect her with me? He looked down. Because they promised they'd erase my debt. My name, my record, a clean slate. All I had to do was disappear. Take her with me. Grayson stepped forward. "You're not taking anyone." And that was when he ran. Grayson fired once, not to hit, but to warn. He fled through the woods, vanishing into the dark. Backup arrived 5 minutes later. Dogs. Lights. They would catch him, they promised. But it didn't matter to me anymore. Because in that moment, I realized I had already won. Not because Elliot would go to prison. Not because we'd exposed the truth. But because Bethany was safe. And she knew, without question, that I had never, ever let her go.